Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. This is Anytime Media. We are your hosts. My name is Ocean Simeono.
I'm to the rear.
On this episode of Our Take, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be doing a review of Netflix's original movie titled All Quiet on the Western Front. This movie, I believe, is a remake, right? Isn't there an older?
Few.
Yeah. But this is the most recent, obviously.
Yeah.
Just came out 2 weeks ago, I think.
It was a little while back.
It was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it was very popular when it first came out. And we are going to do a review on it because here at Anytime Media, I don't think the right word is to say that we love war movies because I don't think that's an appropriate word, but we just really, I don't know what the right word is.
Fascinated?
Yeah, and I feel compelled to watch war movies because they tell the stories of,
especially real stories.
Yeah, especially stories like this.
Yeah.
And there are war movies out there that are kind of way too theatrical and whatnot, but for the most part, movies like We Were Soldiers, 1917, Saving Private Ryan, stuff like that.
Flags of Our Fathers.
Right. All those kinds of movies, they're to me they're important to watch. Not because they are entertaining, but they're important to watch because it's kind of like a respect thing for me. Like I enjoy watching them because I know a lot about these stories. I don't know everything, but the tales that these movies and stories tell are things that should not be forgotten.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
And things that should be remembered and respected and
I feel like
just reflected on, I think, is a good...
I agree so much, and I feel like a lot of the stuff isn't necessarily forgotten, but it's like almost intentionally ignored by a lot of people.
I'm very glad you said that because there's a lot of things that I want to say in the spoiler section that might not be the most popular narrative, I guess you could say. And I knew that you were going to feel that way because we obviously are very like-minded, especially when it comes to this stuff. And it's not just because we both have served, but I think this is something that is...
even not including that.
Yeah.
I've always been felt this kind of way. I guess there's some not necessarily bias, but obvious influence that I get from many of my family for multiple generations I've served. So I guess that in a way kind of influences my opinion on things. But even still, I'm willing to bet even between my family members, we have different opinions on certain things.
Sure. Yeah.
So the mindset I have when I especially going through school with history and stuff, it has always been the same whenever I've been learning about things, even if it's military or different countries and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
For me personally, I feel like I've always had a very particular opinion on how things are.
And I think it's important that we share this prior to diving into this episode because, yes, we are going to review this movie, and yes, we are going to break it down and talk about some things, but I can already foresee that a lot of what we're going to talk about is less about the actual, cinematography and directing and acting and stuff, and more about what it was like to watch this movie and experience the things and what the things that happened in this movie.
Yeah, because this movie is absolutely an experience.
Yeah. So I wanted to preface this episode for you, the viewer, that it's going to be a little bit different, and this movie is not for the faint of heart. And this movie and the things that we're going to talk about from this movie, even just talking about them, because I have some graphics, but none of them are graphic or have any blood or anything crazy.
In the movie,
they
don't hold back.
Right. So I just want to preface this for you guys as the viewers and understand what you guys are walking into for this episode. But like I said, I think it's important that we sit down and we talk about this because I think that's kind of the whole reason why this movie was made, in my opinion.
Well, this movie, there's other things I will relate this movie to. that to me feels similar, and it's like not even just the movie itself. I mean, like the initial story, like the book that this is based off of, which is the actual like survivor of from this war and stuff who wrote the story. Like it's so fascinating seeing the other side,
right? So
and it's going to be a little weird, I guess, to explain it as we go along with what happens and stuff, and trying to compare them to, I guess our side or perspective of it.
To clarify, ladies and gentlemen, this particular movie is the story of a German soldier and his friends that
group of
go off to
friends,
war, right? And we as Americans are very used to war movies being from our perspective, right? From the, let's say, winning side perspective.
The Allies.
And our, just being the good guys, you know what I mean? But this particular story is of a German soldier who, when we look at it on paper, black and white, he's the enemy. And so for us to watch a story about this soldier who you're, supposed to hate because he's the enemy, but then seeing like what he goes through and his side of everything is very compelling.
Yeah,
and very
I do want to state
eye-opening
and remind that this is a World War I story.
Yeah.
So I know still the Germans were not an ally, but it was not like when people think German, like they go straight to Nazis.
World War II, Nazis.
And that's not what this is.
No.
So I do want, like, there's a difference between the two. I mean, I know it's the same country, but there is a big difference.
Right, between Germany, World War I, Germany, World War II. Germany, World War I was
just different time periods of Germany. Yeah. This is not the typical World War II Nazi fascism that we're talking about here.
We're talking about a country who was roped into supporting Russia because of their geographical location, as well as the fact that they just were underpowered. They didn't really have anything to fight against Russia, so they figured they'd join them instead.
Yeah.
And they figured Russia was going to come out on the winning side. So but okay. So before, because I feel like we're about to dive in.
Yeah, we are.
Dive in head first. So, spoiler-free section, as always, right? Spoiler-free section scores, spoilers. That's the order that we try to keep the show in, and that's what we're going to do. Spoiler-free section. This movie was incredible. It was an amazing depiction of a viewpoint and a perspective that I don't know that has been told really outside of like books and real accounts and whatnot. But as far as like big screen or production stuff, it's incredible to see this side of the war, and as somebody that knows probably a little bit more about World War I than the average person, I thought that it was done really well. The accuracy, the depiction of how things worked, what daily life was like for these soldiers, and the things that they had to go through, like, and just where they were at the end, and because it's fascinating, it's incredible, and it's also heartbreaking. It's incredibly heartbreaking, even though this guy is, supposed to be an enemy and whatnot. It's still incredibly heartbreaking to watch what he had to go through. So I know that, I had some other things came up and I wasn't able to watch the movie as soon as you would have liked, but I really wish I had, because this movie was amazing. Yeah. And I'm thankful for the experience, because it's just a kind of like a reminder. It's kind of like that.
This is literally one of those, like,
when you need need like a
what's that word? It's like when you're
like,
I can't think.
To me, it's kind of like when you need a slap in the face and kind of brought back down to
almost like
reality,
like a kind of a reality check, but just a. I can't even think of the word.
And I can't either. But
it's like a particular outlook on life, just a reminder of like
it could be so much worse.
Just
and it
things
was at
that
some point
happened
Yeah.
And like that actually happened. That
That
I know
led
it
to where
was
we
a
are
long
now.
time ago to
Right.
us, but like this is a real like this stuff really happens.
Yeah. And I think it would be beneficial for majority of the world to watch this movie. I think it would help a lot of people with their viewpoint and perspective on the world.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. Well, again, I don't know that enjoy is the right word. Because
I mean, I enjoy it in the sense that it gave me such a profound,
I'm appreciative of
yeah, I guess feelings about this movie.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it like you said, it is incredible. Like this
Yeah.
movie is insanely detailed
Yeah.
in both very subtle, like beautiful ways, but also the most gut wrenching, like
Yeah.
horrific things you've probably will see. Like if you were experiencing this in
Yeah.
real life, you could possibly see. Like I wouldn't, like you wouldn't, of course, you wouldn't wish this upon anybody
No,
to
definitely
experience
not.
this. And the fact that it tells so compelling of a story on these like this small group of friends seemingly doing something that was just out of the blue and then going through this insanely long journey, and it's being told from, like you said, the other side.
Right.
And I do want to say that I'm glad you finally watched this movie and enjoyed it. And for those maybe some of you viewers as well as maybe you, if you want another movie that to me this reminded me of that is
I can
very
guess.
good,
I think you can guess what you're about to say.
is Letters from Iwo
I was
Jima,
just gonna say, yeah.
starring Ken Watanabe.
It gives me very reminiscent vibes of there's two. Is it Flags of Our Fathers?
Flags of Our Father
Yeah.
is the American version,
And then Letters of Iwo
Japanese.
Jima is it's literally like a lot of the movies connect to each other.
Yeah, intentionally.
And it's basically the telling of the same thing, but from two
different
sides.
perspectives, yeah.
And this is, to me, it felt very similar to that in that regard, that we're getting the other side.
Right.
You know?
They took that movie, which is amazing as well.
Yeah.
But because of the time period that this takes place in, it's like, I feel like it's a little extra gritty.
Yeah. So
'Cause of the
let's
type of
leave that
warfare.
for the
Yeah.
spoiler session, because I want to make something
So,
very
so
clear.
what is your rating for this?
So as far as scores go, man, I'm gonna give this a really solid 9. I don't think I can give it a 10. I don't know. It's
There's nothing wrong with a 9.
yeah, it's very
That's a high score.
it's like it's right on the verge. I don't know why I can't give it a 10, but there's for some reason I just feel like I got to give it a 9, but it's probably like if we were doing decibels, it's probably like a 9.9. So, I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it to anybody over the age of like 13.
Yeah, you might. Yeah.
Yeah. And not because like I don't like a lot of people out there, they let their kids watch crazy stuff, right? But to me,
Okay, yeah. So that's a very like general idea, like the
Yeah.
age thing. It really depends on the kid.
it's a maturity level. Like,
Yeah,
you
so-
don't want to watch this without being able to understand the things that it's talking about
Right.
and understand why. Otherwise,
But yeah,
it'll be
I feel
lost
like you
on
would
you.
definitely appreciate this more as like a 16, 17
Yeah.
age.
So, yeah, especially somebody that age, right? And we'll talk about why. But for you, Taylor, what is your score for All Quiet on the Western Front?
So there are very few things, honestly, that bugged me about this movie.
Hmm.
But this movie blew me away.
Yeah.
So it's a 10.
Oh wow, I think that's only your second 10 ever, right? Because we gave 10. I know we both gave 10s for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
No, this is my third
What is the other one?
Top Gun.
Oh, right.
think.
Top Gun. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you did give it 10 for Top Gun. Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I think Netflix did an outstanding job
Yeah.
with this movie.
Who is the director of this movie? I'm very curious. So Taylor, ladies and gentlemen, gives it a perfect score of a 10 out of 10, and I am giving it a 9. And
The
but-
director is Edward Berger.
Congratulations, Edward Berger.
Yeah.
You received a 10. And it very well could have been a 10, but I'm feeling a 9 for this movie.
Yeah.
But still very highly recommend.
Yeah.
So that's our scores, ladies and gentlemen. Like we said, I highly recommend that you guys watch it.
Yeah.
If anything, for a quote unquote reality check, something just to remind you that this happened, that this is real stuff, and that it's important to remember these things because of that old, saying that those who forget or don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it kind of thing, right? Do I think that this specifically with trench warfare and all that stuff will happen again? No, but I think it's important that we reflect on our history to prevent the same ideals and things.
Yeah, I was going to say it's never one-to-one recreations.
Right.
But conceptually, it always repeats itself.
Yeah. So I think that it's important for people to watch for that aspect and for just kind of like honor. It's like honoring. Like the way I kind of see it is a little bit is that by watching these things and reflecting on these things, I'm kind of honoring the people that went through those experiences.
Yeah.
By their stories being told and by me knowing their stories and thinking about it and reflecting on it and why it's important. So I recommend you guys watch it. But like we said,
I highly recommended, but be warned.
Yeah, it's very, very graphic and very, very dark. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive into some spoilers. Highly recommend you watch this before you guys join us for the spoiler section. But once you do watch it, come back because I think there's some unique perspectives that me and Taylor have on some of these things that will be useful for you guys. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is your official
spoiler alert.
All right, man. So, this movie is probably I really enjoy 1917, the movie 1917, and I think that 1917 is still probably my favorite war movie of all time. And I think the only thing that really 1917 has on this movie is just the concept of a one take shot, just the
technical,
technicality and the skill level of the director and the cinematographer and everybody involved to create a movie that is technically one shot. I mean, it's not actually one shot, but it's one scene, we'll say.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I think that 1917 takes the cake. But similarly to 1917, this movie is brutally honest.
Yeah.
Brutally honest. And I think that it would be remiss if it wasn't brutally honest. Because something that I don't think a lot of people really know. Because as far as wars go, I think that World War II gets a lot of attention because
of course, it's the most
whole
glorified one.
Nazi and the Holocaust and all of that, and it's very tragic. And I'm not trying to take anything away from World War One at all, but World War II. But if we're talking in terms of the most grotesque and brutal and just like messed up stuff, I personally think that World War One was worse than World War II, as far as that
honestly
stuff goes.
I feel like that's just objectively correct.
It probably
not
is.
in this, I would never, if World War II veteran came up to be like, oh, you haven't, I haven't done what you've done
at all. Yeah,
but I feel like it is objectively true to say that World War One was way more brutal than World War II, because by the time we get World War II, we as a world have decided that we can do certain things during war. That is when we have established the prisoners of war and all that kind of.
Was Geneva Convention prior to World War II, or is that post World War II? It's post World War II.
I think it's right after.
Yeah, I think Geneva Convention was created because of World War II. I can't remember if it was because of World War I or World War II, but no, I think you're right, and I don't think that a lot of people know that though. I don't think a lot of people understand what happened during World War One and the absolutely almost demonic things that happened during World War One. Like when we're talking about gas and trench warfare and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, this is like,
horrible.
you know, yeah. World War II has a lot of stuff, but like this is the first time
Yeah.
humans have certain technology with like machine guns being like widespread used,
Right.
gas being weaponized, so chemical
warfare.
even like early aerial reconnaissance stuff
Yep.
combined with that, artillery strikes,
Artillery was a huge part of
tank
World War I.
warfare. All this was new at this time.
And countries were just okay with just launching it all.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I can't remember the exact number, so I don't want to say, but I remember reading an article about how many artillery shells were shot during World War One, and the
It was
number,
insane.
the number would blow your socks off. Like we're talking, like 7 figures. Or no, not 7.
Basically
9 figures.
Basically the equivalent of what the US did in Vietnam with bullets
Yeah.
and bombs, but in World War One
Yeah.
with artillery shells.
It's absolutely insane. So I think that for a lot of people, when they watch this movie, they may like. What I don't want to happen is I don't want people to watch this movie and think it's in any way a dramatization of the event. In fact, I personally would go as far as saying that it might have been toned down a little bit. Like if
Probably in some cases.
if we're talking about, like, there are some very messed up things that happen, but one of the big things that kind of doesn't get shown in this just because of the events that they show, and it's not necessarily a knock on the movie, but there is very little like showing of what it was like to live in a trench specifically, and the kinds of things that you had to deal with, especially in the Western Front where it was constantly raining, the weather was horrible, and the supply chain issues with getting food to the front and resupply and everything. And it's because of the particular events that they decide to tell, those particular aspects of the war don't really get explained very well or given much time to show, which is fine. You know, it's not, I don't think it's a knock on the movie, but there's some like really, really bad stuff that happened. Like a lot of people died not because of like warfare itself, but just because of the living conditions.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah, there's a lot of people that died just like you said, living conditions and like the spreads of like disease and
malnutrition.
Yeah,
all that stuff. And so I just don't want people to think that this movie is a dramatization of reality. So I just want to preface our conversation with the fact that everything that is in this movie is insane and crazy and very dark and kind of hard to look at and comprehend and process, but very real and very important to like I reflect on, I guess, so that we hopefully never end up at this point again. So this movie, like you said in the spoiler-free section, is the story of a group of young German boys that are all they're not in college, right? This is high school?
I feel like they're from high school.
Yeah, I think this is high school age. And they decide, we're gonna join.
They just all jokingly get together and they're like, "Oh, let's go enlist.
Yeah, we're gonna go fight for our country.
Let's go be men."
It's a very I think it's a very, I don't want to say cool, but it's like a depiction of what it was really like. Like a lot of these kids didn't know that.
I love that this obviously is the beginning, of course, but it captures, I feel like, this kind of time period very well, because nowadays you would never see this.
Right.
You would never going to see this, probably for maybe even forever again. But this captures a point in time for this country, especially, where the youth just feel the way they do. Like just seeing them being
sense
so
of nationalism,
happy, and they want to like be like, "Oh, let's go be men and do what the men do and serve our country and fight for the fatherland." And just capturing the innocence of these kids too.
I would also say the naivety as well.
Yeah, right.
Because they just don't know. Like they don't have
they
technology.
have no idea what they're about to get
Right.
into.
And it wasn't publicized, the conditions of the
Purposely.
front. Right. Because they
purposely
want
avoid
people
that
to
stuff.
join, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't know, and we're sitting there like, oh my God, these kids are just walking into this with no idea what's about to happen to them. But it, like you said, it captures it perfectly. This really is how it happened, and this is really why so many people
Right.
died.
Like we have a similar portrayal of this with the United States, usually for World War II movies.
Yes.
In a very similar way.
Yes. Very much so.
Because these friends getting together, man, like in the movie like flips real fast.
Real fast.
Even not showing you anything military, like the moment they get to the in processing, I mean the movie technically starts with the one soldier that it connects to, which is graphic immediately. But once it cuts to this and they're like in processing, they're getting like their medical examination and all that kind of stuff.
Right. The
And
uniform issue.
Yeah, the one guy gets handed his uniform and he's like, oh, this must be a mix-up. I have somebody else's uniform. And the guy who gave it to him, obviously he knows that's not a mistake.
That this person died and we're
he's
recycling
dead.
uniforms.
Exactly. That little detail alone just tells you like how screwed up this situation was for these people.
Just how dark.
And of course,
really was.
like you said, it captures his naivety where he's like, oh, it's just the mistake.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, no. He just cuts off the name tag and
he's
hands it right back to him.
Oh, it just must have been too small for him. Here you go. Yeah.
No, he definitely didn't die horribly.
And we just re-sewed his jacket up and are now issuing it to you. Yeah. And the sense of nationalism and the sense of excitement doesn't get lost on the boys yet. They go through their training
and all that. Yeah.
We don't see any of the training, which is fine. We get it. The training happens.
Yeah, it would take a long time.
And then they end up going to, I don't remember the unit name. I think it's the 74th.
I can't remember.
It's 70 something, I think. It's either 74th or 78th infantry something. But they end up going, getting placed in a unit. They're all together. It's him and starts off with 3 other friends, right?
Yeah, they pick up the fourth one.
And they pick up a fourth one.
They get to their unit.
Yeah. So they go and they get to camp and then they get told, oh, you're going to the front line, and then they go to the front line and this is kind of where the reality of war and what war was then starts to sink in with them, right? Because right off the bat, they get there and there's starts off with just poor weather conditions and whatnot, and they have to bail out the trench, and that's when they kind of pick up their fourth friend.
Not only that, but they get to the checkpoint,
right?
And they're like, we need these trucks.
Yeah, they get
so
kicked
they're
off their
immediately
trucks.
like, all right, I guess we're marching to our
the
unit.
front. Yeah, and then they get attacked by artillery barrages.
Well, they don't get directly attacked. It's just
it's like creeping advances.
No. Before that, I'm talking before they get to the actual main unit. They get
right.
scared. And
it's just random
artillery. The officer's like, oh no, that's just like
poor
blind,
French.
Yeah, like
bad French
aim. And it captures another little detail which I really loved, and it's they all freak out, and then somebody's like, gas, and so the guy just like one of them just takes his sweet time, like pulling out his mask, and then he finally gets it on, or he just struggles or something, and so the officer's like,
well, he helps the friend with the glasses, right? The main character helps the friend with the glasses get his mask on, and that's what makes him take forever for his mask to get on.
Okay. Oh, I just forgot. But
yeah.
Either way, he struggles to get his mask on, and then the guy's like,
you would have been dead.
Yeah, you would have been dead, so now you're going to wear that until
All
I
day.
tell you to take it off.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, crap.
Yeah. I got to hand it, on that note, just real quick, I got to hand it to the costume design and
everything looks great.
The people that sourced all of that stuff. Like, I don't know if that's real. Like, I don't think it can be real stuff because that's like over 100 years ago almost. Yeah. Actually, it is over 100 years ago. But they did a really good job of procuring period accurate materials and things like their gas masks, their weapons, their clothes, helmets, all that stuff.
Everything in this movie is very
It
accurate.
looks really good. Yeah, so I got to hand it to the costume design and all the people involved with that. This is pretty incredible to see. So then they actually make it to the front. You know, all that other stuff happens. They end up getting, they end up in a barrage. They get attacked by artillery, and they go into a bunker, and then the bunker collapses on them.
Which is
and that's kind of like when it really sets in with them, because now they've been attacked. Now they've lost people, and then the main character is told to go and get the tags, right?
Dog tags, yeah.
Start collecting dog tags, and it's a very solemn moment. And then one of his friends,
I do want to point out too that the scene that you were mentioning, it's important that you realize that when at this point in time with these characters, they witness the soldiers doing what they were told, going into this bunker
Right.
and dying
because they were doing what they were told.
Yeah, just doing. I mean, that they did the best that they could. They still died.
Right.
Like this is just, like it's just I guess an idea that like I don't know. Maybe people might not realize like sometimes you can do everything right.
Yeah.
And still not make it.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point that there's not always a way out, and sometimes there's nothing you can do but just die.
Right. So when we see these characters go through that, like you said, and then the officer's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you just standing around?
Yeah.
Start doing stuff." And he's like, "Go collect dog tags," and he's just like,
Ugh.
yeah, he's just in shock of what he just witnessed. And like this is only the beginning. Like
Right. This is literally 10 minutes into the movie.
yeah, like
And this movie is 2.5 hours long.
This is a long movie, and this is this beginning of it.
Yeah.
So these people are like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, and you just he walks around for a while collecting these dog
Oh, yeah.
tags of all these bodies and stuff.
Yeah. So there's a group of friends. This is
I think right after that
Cropper,
is
right?
when the last friend gets introduced, right?
the
veteran.
the veteran dude that's been there. Cat.
Yeah,
Cat. Yeah. So this is Cropper, right? Cropper, right? Yeah, pretty sure.
I think so.
This is Cat.
yeah. Favorite character.
That's not who it is. That's not anybody. This is Tajad. I don't know how to
He's
say his
the
name.
well, he's from another country, right? That guy.
Yeah, from Prussia.
Yeah.
I think that's it. The only other one that I couldn't find was Franz. So the story continues along the path of these soldiers, and it jumps. There's a few big time jumps that happen
Yep.
because it starts out in I think 1914. I want to say. I think is the beginning of the movie.
I don't remember the exact.
Maybe
time.
1915, and then it ends at the end of the war in 1918. So, or yeah, I think it's beginning of 1918. So there's a lot of things that happen, but there's also some big time jumps.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially right here.
Yeah,
Or
there's that
this is the
18
first
months.
one, yeah, that jumps.
There's an 18-month time jump, and it jumps to them, and now they're like kind of, they're not on the front anymore. They're at like a town or village or something. And
Yeah, it's just like a. I don't want to say R&R, but it's just.
yeah, it's
kinda like
their
a-
rear. Yeah, they're not in the
Yeah.
front anymore, and they're kind of recovering and whatever. And there's a really heartfelt scene of the main character and Cat stealing a goose
Yeah.
from a farmer, and then the group of friends are all huddled around a fire, and they're eating the goose and having a good time, and jolly is all good. And I really like that scene because even though the story that is being told and the things that happened during this time in this particular war were so dark and so messed up, I think it's still important to recognize that in the midst of all of that, there were still times where people were happy and people.
Right. This is what I meant by there's subtle scenes, which to most people probably won't know unless you've been in a similar situation. I haven't been in World War One, World War Two, or any war except for the global war on terrorism. But it's just it's weird, I guess, for people to just be like, oh, it's just like a funny scene, or but it's really
not.
It's it's the fact that even in such a dire situation, that people still find ways to hold on to hope and their humanity.
Yeah,
and just I know it's like they're stealing a goose, which is a bad thing.
Yeah,
but it's their way of getting closer to each other.
I think you nailed it on the head with the word humanity. I think you nailed it on the head that even in a time where it really seems like the world threw out the idea of humanity and are just,
especially going through the things.
But these guys and I'm sure it happened all over the war, right? But people are still, like you said, finding ways to be human and to not just lose all hope.
Yeah.
So I actually really liked that scene, and it was a really heartfelt scene for me. And it's very clear to me that I have I don't want to say a bias, but I guess maybe just a different understanding of these kinds of things, because even watching it with the person that I watched it with, it's very clear which scenes hit me harder compared to the other person.
Right.
I don't know. This scene hit me really hard. I know it was supposed to be an upbeat scene and a fun scene and happy and whatnot, but it actually hit me really hard. I was really emotional in this moment because for exactly what we just shared. I've never been in war. I've never been through anything that's even remotely close to what those guys went through.
No, yeah.
But I've been in some crappy situations.
Yeah, just even being in a shitty situation and still being able to look to your side and seeing a friend or whatever, your buddy, and just
And I would venture to say that me and you have been in some pretty shitty situations together that we were able to still share a moment similar to
and not make it just completely destroy you.
So that scene hit me pretty hard. I was pretty emotional during that scene, and I do agree with you that it's probably going to be lost on a lot of people.
Yeah, and the thing that's crazy too is, like you said, it's very subtle and it's very emotional at the same time. And throughout this movie, like you said, there's multiple time jumps. It progressively builds.
Yes, because
of the experiences that they keep going through.
Yeah,
and it just builds and builds. So by the time you get the final, I guess, heartfelt moment, it is.
God, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So horrible.
I know exactly.
I don't want to jump to it yet, but
we'll get there. So like you said, these friends, they go through a lot of things together. And I'm gonna just say it up front. Nobody survives. I'm just gonna say up front that none of them, not even the main character, survives.
No.
And so
in fact, the next jump is when we start losing people.
Right. The next jump is I think it's this. Right?
No, I think that's the next one. Because I think there's another artillery barrage, and the friend with glasses dies first.
You know what we're also missing is the lost platoon or whatever, the lost unit.
Oh, you're right.
Remember? Because this group of people, after this time jump, now they're kind of seasoned, they're kind of veterans. They've been there for over a year and a half now.
Yeah. And they're back in the rear, kind of.
Yeah. And then they get tasked to, after Franz goes off and has a great night with some ladies. Props to you, Franz, for getting some. But they get tasked to go and look for a group of lost men, guys that haven't checked in. They're supposed to be there.
Company.
Yeah, haven't checked in. They're not supposed. They're not where they're supposed to be. So
because they were supposed to
kind of reinforce
what's
them.
it called? Replace their unit.
So like, all right, go look for them. So they did. They end up finding them in this like
Warehouse
trail or this train yard warehouse place where the French deployed gas and the soldiers did not make it.
Yeah, the entire company was just in this room dead.
Yeah, and it's a really another one of those really sad moments that there's not a whole lot of time spent on that particular scene, but if you really kind of think about it and dive into it, there's a lot of kids in that unit. There's a lot of young kids, and they specifically say that it wasn't necessarily the gas that killed them like right off the bat. It wasn't like they were taken by surprise or anything.
It's both a scare factor based on, like I said, this was supposed to be a unit replacing them.
Right.
So this is a fresh group of soldiers.
Right.
So, like you said, very young individuals. And because the officers in charge of them made the big mistake and thinking, oh, it's just, it's not a big deal.
Clear.
And they took off their gas mask early.
Yeah, too early.
So the initial, like you said, the initial attack is not what gets them. It's the lingering effects.
Right. And it's just it's another really sad moment. Like, I don't know. That kind of stuff really like gets me. It's sad because they're young, but it's also like a little frustrating because I know what it's like to have stupid and shitty leadership.
Yeah.
And the fact that shitty leadership at that time led to the deaths of what seemed like 50 plus people.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess throughout this entire movie, it's like nobody has a heroic death.
Right.
There's no heroes. There's no winners in this war.
Yeah. No, you're
Everybody
exactly right.
loses.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's
So this entire company, they died for no reason, except for the fact that they had stupid officers.
Nothing. Yeah. So it's sad. It's really sad. It's really frustrating. But it's a reality, man. There really are really dumb people. Even today, even to this day, there are dumb people that are in leadership roles that, put in the right situation, would probably end up getting a lot of people hurt or killed. So. Yeah, so then unfortunately we start losing people. The first person to die is
Glasses guy.
Franz? It's Glasses guy.
Yeah.
Well, he dies in the initial barrage, right?
No.
Yeah, he does. Because remember his he...
Oh, actually, no, you're right.
Yeah.
When he's taking the tags, he sees him.
He sees him.
Oh, crap.
So that's the first time he dies, or the first friend that dies. And then there's the 18-month jump. And then the second person to die, I think, is Franz, right? Yeah, pretty sure it's Franz because they get separated, and then Franz ends up dying. We don't see his death.
No,
but
he's off screen.
He ends up dying, and then they get the scarf, right?
Yeah.
That from Franz, that was from the girl that Franz spent the night with, or whatever. Yeah. And then I think Cropper is the next person to die.
He's the next one,
unfortunately. Crop. And this is... He died... How does he die? Was it... He dies from a flamethrower, right? Because he's running away.
They're all in a retreat.
So they're in a retreat because they advance. They rush over.
This is another thing. God. I know this is like just a World War I thing, but... When they set up the scene, like, of course, it's trench warfare, right? You know what's coming.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you right now, if somebody was like, when I blow this whistle, you climb out of this trench and you run and charge the enemy, it's going to take me a while to really gather the courage to do that.
So here's the thing, though. Back in those days, which I know you know this, but and they show it a little bit in this movie. Back in those days, if you refuse to charge, your officer shoot you in the back.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah,
I know that's the thing.
Yeah.
But just that idea of when that officer gets up and he just starts blowing and you just got to climb and run and charge. Like, a bayonet charge is one thing, but doing it during this kind of one, across no man's land. And then once they get there and they
successfully
get
win
the next trench,
which is like 100 yards over
It's not.
the hill. Then we get this scene of them in a like food storage area, which
Yeah.
I don't understand why the French have so much food. Because,
Yeah, there was a surprising amount of food.
yeah,
there.
I didn't. This is one.
So
this is one
I
of the things I didn't really like. I get why they did put it in here because they're trying to show how hungry these guys
they
are,
just-
but
yeah.
the conditions were just as bad for the French as they were for
Right.
for the Germans. So
Like
I don't.
it's surprising that they had all this stuff
Yeah.
just sitting there, right?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that part of this scene. The intended effect is there, and
I was gonna say it's still
Yeah.
it gave me the
still a powerful scene.
yeah what it was supposed to do, but it was a little weird seeing it.
Right.
But yeah, you do get the effect that like, oh man, they're like, we just
Starving.
struck gold,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh yeah, let's start eating everything.
Yeah.
And then you just go from that, and you're like, oh, it's like a you
It's like,
almost
oh,
you
you
almost
win.
forget that there's a war going on.
Well, you get there's like a small victory. It's like a small victory, and so you're like, oh, all right, things are headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like, and we're at this point, despite the fact that these are German soldiers, despite the fact that technically there are enemies or whatever, we're rooting for them. Like
Right.
you as a viewer are rooting for the success
Because
and
this is the first time we're
Yeah.
seeing like progress happen for these characters.
And you're like, yes, like good things are happening to these people that have had shitty situations, and despite the fact that we aren't supposed to like them, we're still, good for you. Until
it gets flipped real fast. Yeah.
until these things show up. So the French are some of the first people to develop tanks and deploy tanks in modern warfare, or in then modern warfare, I should say. And it was a huge turning point
Yeah.
in the battle.
This is another example of like, I can feel
Yeah.
like how terrified
God,
I
I mean,
would be sitting
look at
there
this dude's face.
looking at this tank rolling. Because
A lot of them have no idea what the hell they are.
right, like at the point, like they're in the trench and they start, kind of clearing it up, and then you just start hearing like explosions happening, and they're like,
Rumbling
"Oh,
and-
what's going on?" And they just start hearing screaming and stuff, and then all of a sudden, they peek out to look forward through the fog of war,
Yeah.
and they just see these massive tanks rolling towards them.
Right.
And for a lot of these people, this is the first time they've seen this in their life.
Yeah.
Like they've probably only heard stories of
And
these things.
some of them probably not even, because a lot of them were fresh to the fight. So
Right.
they probably didn't.
So seeing these insane war machines rolling at
Yeah.
you, and you're like, what do I do?
yeah.
how do
how
I
am I
fight
supposed
that?
to? Yeah.
And they immediately just get steamrolled.
Yeah. So the tanks charged the line that the Germans overtook and pushed them back.
Push
and
them right back.
push them right back to where they started, essentially. Actually, farther back
Yeah,
than where
actually
they started.
farther, yeah.
And we get a lot of scenes,
It's
a lot of
literally
very,
one step forward, 3 steps back.
yeah. We get a lot of very grotesque and messed up
deaths,
scenes
yeah.
in this particular sequence of events. Not only do we have tanks, but following the tanks right after were these guys, their flamethrower battalion or whatever, that just, oh man.
Yeah, they come in, like the tanks are just the spearhead.
Yeah.
These guys are just cleaning
Their
up the
mob
mess.
crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tanks roll through, blast through. There's a couple scenes of like a tank rolling through a trench, and then these particular tanks, they're trench tanks, so they have mounted MGs on the sides of the tanks specifically to shoot parallel,
Yeah,
or sorry,
so as soon as
perpendicular
they-
to the tank.
Yeah, as soon as they come over the trench, the machine guns just clear it.
Shoot down the trench line, and oh man, it just like you said, like as a soldier in that moment, what like how do you do anything? Like even run away? Like
Well, the thing is,
I think I would be so paralyzed by fear.
They make it a point that like when they come on screen that they can't run away. They just
Yeah.
die immediately if they try to
Yeah.
run. So what do? They hide. You hide, and then what happens? You get shot trying to survive in the trench
Right.
and hide. And then on top of that, they're
if you hide
followed
too
by
long,
these guys.
yeah,
So you have
You're
to
just gonna burn
run
to
after everything is so difficult to figure out
yeah.
like what to do, how to get out of there, how to survive.
The only way the guy survived was by like after just somehow surviving the tanks, actually passing through the trench, and then like running behind the tanks, and then they actually take down one tank.
Right. So one soldier, I imagine it was maybe.
It was Cat. I'm pretty sure it was Cat, right?
I thought it was. I can't. I don't know for sure. It might have just been like another, like an NCO or something that was there. But I think it was Cat because I know he had been there for like. He'd been fighting for a while.
He's probably one of the only people that even knew about the tanks.
He probably has seen them before, and which would make sense. But basically, there was one soldier that had experience fighting them before and was like, "Look, we need to use grenades, and throw them inside." And so after the very few people that survived the initial wave of going through, they all climb out of the trench and attack the tanks from behind and start throwing their hand grenades through the little shoot holes with the machine guns.
And destroy the tracks and stuff. Yeah. And so they end up, we at least see one tank being destroyed. Yeah. And then that's the moment that, unfortunately, Crop is on his way to death. So Crop kind of gets left behind. He stays at the tank that gets destroyed and is fighting. But then he kind of gets cut off by the enemy. And then we get a very sad scene of Paul, our main character, running away, and then the flamethrower.
One of the flamethrower soldiers just lights up.
So okay, I want to break down the scene just a little bit more than that, because this is another nuance that may be lost on people a little bit. So the French were quote unquote good guys ish, sort of, because the French actually started out bad in World War I and then kind of came around a little bit. But so this scene is very messed up, because it's again, it's prior to the Geneva and prior to prisoner of war rules and stuff, but they give up. Crop and a couple other soldiers that are around him, German soldiers, they give up. They surrender, and Crop's like, please don't shoot me. I surrender, I give up. And those French soldiers, they're just like, nah. And they shoot him, and then Crop tries to run away, and a flamethrower guy just lights him up. Yeah. And
I want to be very specific about this, because I do want to say, like, it is very important, because it isn't a detail that is specific to the French, or not just the French. No, not even in this particular time period, because even the United States does this too. It's basically just the fact that we as humans, as much as we want to, believe whether we're good or not or whatever, whatever the case is, we just somehow get to this very low point as human beings that we just sometimes give up and commit literal war crimes.
Yeah.
And there's another movie that I could point out that has a very similar scene. But just the act of, like you said, they surrendered, and the French soldiers
are on his knees with his hands up in the air.
Yeah, they're just very casual too. They're just walking in this line because it's got a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And it's not just the flamethrower soldiers. There's also, just random ones following them and stuff. And he just lights them on fire, and then just keeps going. And they don't shoot him or anything. And he's just like, they're burning and screaming in agony, and nobody does anything. And it's just like, it's crazy that somebody can come to that point, and commit such an atrocity. Yeah.
Like what? How do you end up?
I know, like it's just like a different, like I have a different time.
Yeah, sure.
But it's so depressing.
No, it is. See that. Yeah, it's depressing to know that at some point in our species history, there were a large amount of people that were at that point.
Right.
Because it was not just a couple guys in that particular scene. Like that happened.
There's a large formation of them.
But not just even in that moment. There's a large, like all across the war that happened.
Right.
On both sides too.
Multiple wars, like.
Yeah. Even to this day, it still happens. Like we still hear about stuff like that every once in a while. But like, it's crazy to think, or it's sad to think that at some point in our species history that there was that many people that we're at a point of being like, you know what, I don't care. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna-
just, it is what it is.
yeah, I don't care. So, yeah, that scene was really sad. So unfortunately, Crop is dead.
Like I said too, like it's interesting that this movie, of course, it's from a German side, but to view it in such a way that the French, who like you said are supposed to be like the good
Right.
side, is committing these acts to the Germans, so you
atrocities, yeah.
feel sad for them,
Right.
even though you know, it's almost like, oh, that's kind of
History
weird.
tells us that we should not like the Germans of
Right.
this time period, but really we feel sad for them because it's like, man, like, what the hell? Like, no one, just because you're quote unquote bad, you still shouldn't be subjected to that kind of pain and that kind of death. That's just
Yeah.
horrible. Is it right after that we get the scene of Paul falling into the crater
Yes.
and then fighting
Because
the
he
Frenchman?
continues to run away.
Yeah,
And then he kind of gets separated.
right. He falls into this
This is
gigantic
another
crater.
crazy scene too.
Yeah. Falls into a crater. A Frenchman falls in there as well. They fight. Paul ends up stabbing the Frenchman multiple times in the chest and doesn't kill him initially. And that's where this scene gets very gut-wrenching, I'll say.
Yeah.
Very gut-wrenching because not only does Paul one get separated, so we get the initial emotion of him being separated from everybody and being
he's
on his
alone,
own
afraid.
in the middle of no man's land. But then there's a Frenchman in the same pit, and they look at each other, and then they look at their weapons, and then they are scrambling to see who can
Yeah.
get to the other person first.
This is where their instincts are kicking in
Right.
to fight each other.
And so then they do fight. Paul comes out victorious, but then after he, ends up stabbing the guy and incapacitates him at first, he sits there and watches the Frenchman die, and it messes him up. Like,
Well, so what happens is like you said, he wins, stabs the Frenchman multiple times,
Yeah.
and he just falls. They both fall to the floor, and this Frenchman is just bleeding out.
yeah,
And he's just like coughing
slowly
up
dying.
blood. Yeah, he's dying very slowly.
Yeah,
And in this moment is when, what's his name? Paul. This is when he gets this short moment of realization.
yeah. It's like the fog of war lifts momentarily
like,
for him.
Once they like, oh, I fought him, like I win, and then he's like, oh, what did I just do?
I just stabbed another human being 4 times in the chest, and now he's slowly dying before my eyes.
Yeah, and so then it gets worse as the scene goes on because he's like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like this is not what I.
Well, then
you know,
he
wanna
even
do.
tries to save him.
Yeah,
Okay.
it makes it even worse because
Yeah.
he feels so bad that he's like, hold on, let me. Like
wait,
he walks
wait,
up to him and
maybe
he's
I
like, let me
can-
try to save you, and then the Frenchman's like, oh, he's
Yeah.
trying to like defend himself, well, even though he's just bleeding out. There's
Right.
nothing
Because he pulls
really
out
to
his
it.
knife to
Right.
cut open his clothes. And he's just like, wait.
And
He's like,
understandably
"No, I'm not
so,
gonna-"
he's freaking
Yeah.
out, and he's like, no, and he's trying to like stop
Yeah.
him, and then he's like, oh, friend.
Yeah, comrade.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a scene that is really hard to watch, actually. Like, it's really hard to watch him go from fight or flight instinct, winning the fight, and then coming to the realization of what he actually just did,
Yeah.
And-
then trying to,
and then trying to fix
Fix
it
it.
unsuccessfully.
yeah, because he medicine at this time was
Yeah.
basically zero.
Yeah.
So he pulls out his only bandage, basically, it's just
Pretty
some
much, yeah.
rags.
It's just gauze.
Yeah, it's like relatively clean gauze, and tries to pack it into his wound, and he dies.
Yeah.
And then again, he gets hit with a feeling like, oh my god.
Then it gets even worse because then he goes through the guy's jacket and finds a book, like a little booklet
almost like
that
a-
has
yeah.
his wife, a picture of his wife and his child in it.
Yeah.
And, it's just a moment of him realizing, oh my God, I just took this father and husband away from these people. I
family,
personally,
yeah.
single-handedly took it away. And it's a lot different when you're sitting on the other side of the trench and you're shooting and your bullet hits them. And it's, that's different.
But this is a very
personal.
scene because he just stabbed him. to
Yeah,
death.
knives are personal. So it's a very hard scene to watch, and it's very gut wrenching for sure. So that's really sad. And let's kind of take a break a little bit from the sadness, just a little bit. And I just want to talk about our boy Nemo. No, I'm just kidding. It's not his actual name, but it is the guy that plays from Marvel's. And I guess he's just gonna perpetually forever just be a Russian actor.
Yeah. Hey, he's great.
Baron Zemo.
Yeah, he's great.
But he leads the delegation from Germany that goes to France to end the war, essentially.
The armistice.
And this happens concurrently with everything that we've talked about already. There's little pieces and scenes here and there of them explaining it, and I just wanted to give a shout out to him because I like this actor a lot.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great actor. And he has it's a very like contrast, I guess, kind of scene, even though it is equally as powerful in its message and what it's portraying. Because it's not the war side, but what he's doing is equally as important as the entire war going on.
Right. So they are headed. Him and his delegation are headed to meet with some high-ranking officers of the French army and to put in place an armistice to end the war. Right. And I just it's.
That must have been so hard to be that guy.
I think it probably was, but I also think that this particular person, and I unfortunately don't know the name, but I'm sure it's on the cast list.
Character?
Yeah, the character's name.
Matthias Erzberger? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah. So that particular person, I'm sure it was hard, but it also was very clear that all this person wanted was to stop the bloodshed. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to stop people from having to die unnecessarily. Right. And that was his whole goal. Because he even is like, hey, you gave me 72 hours, but let's not wait 72 hours. Because in 72 hours,
that's
millions of people could die.
Dying,
yeah. So it is very clear that was his goal. And it was an interesting juxtaposition of the two characters because if we're talking about this the scene of them in the train and the negotiations, I guess you could call it. Yeah. The French are quote unquote the good side, and the German is quote unquote the bad side. But in this particular microcosm of the story, it doesn't feel that way.
Right.
It feels like the French are these overbearing, you're going to agree to our terms and no negotiation.
They're assholes.
Yeah, they're
straight up, the French are fucking assholes.
And then this guy is just no, we just want people we don't want any more people to die.
It's so many mixes of characters, right? You're right. He is pretty much the only individual in this whole, even including the French side, that just wants the fighting to stop.
Right.
And everybody else is just sticks up their ass about pride.
Yeah, very prideful for sure. Yeah, because even there is the German officer that's with him that takes extra long.
Equally, he's fuck them.
I don't really want to sign.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's another just very. It's hard to. I don't want to say it's hard to watch because it's not that hard to watch, but it's just it's very deep. It's a very deep scene. And you could read into it as much as you want, and it even is foreboding as well, or foreshadowing, because a lot of the reason why Germany became who they became during World War II was because of the way that World War I ended,
how it ended,
and the way that Germany was treated when World War I ended, and that's plays into a large reason why Germany became who they were during World War II. And you see it in this particular exchange because this German person or this German delegation, he's okay, we're going to agree to your terms. We get it. We want the war to stop. But can you let us keep our trains and some of these other things so that we can make sure our soldiers get home before the winter sets in, and so that more people don't die because of that, and make sure that we can get food everywhere. And if you he basically says if we agree to everything that's on this list, you're going to cripple our country, and a lot more people are going to die in Germany because of these things that you're asking us to do.
Yeah.
And the French are too bad. sorry, not sorry.
Yeah,
And
straight up.
yeah.
Like-
And it's just like, God dang, like,
Yeah, like I said, it's just seeing it, portrayed that way.
yeah,
Like it's one thing that we know that like the final results and stuff, but to see like a portrayal of
it.
what
Yeah.
what the meeting entailed is crazy because like you said, the French were just
They're
literally
dicks.
they're dicks,
yeah,
like straight up. Like I know, like I said, it's just crazy to see throughout this movie, like all the stuff that they were doing, and then how
Yeah.
they handle this agreement or whatever. Like it's like, oh, no wonder they end up doing what they
Yeah.
do later on.
right. And I'm not saying it justifies
No,
it by any means,
course not.
but you almost
But it
can
makes
understand.
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
It makes sense how they felt, like they felt the way they did.
right. Yeah, it sucks. It's a shitty. I
Like
know
I
I said
said,
let's take
no-
a break from the sad stuff, but
Nobody wins.
this is equally as sad.
Yeah, it is. It's just different.
Different sadness.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So that they finally signed the armistice, and word starts to spread that the war is ending on the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month.
Yep. I do want to point out that after they finally come to the agreement and sign it and stuff, and like you said, set the date and time, the following situation afterwards, like when everybody starts hearing it, it's a mix of emotions because you're like, oh, it's gonna end soon, finally.
Yeah.
And then we get word from the general, Friedrich or whatever,
Friedrich. Yeah. General Friedrich.
who looks
This
cool.
guy.
He looks super cool.
General Friedrich.
And he's like, I guess like your typical arrogant,
Yeah.
like stupid, I guess, officer that's like too much pride.
Yeah.
And he's basically like he was the whole time he's like, oh, these pussies making this agreement and signing this armistice can get the fuck out of here. Like, I'm gonna win this war single-handedly. And so he skirts the rules.
Yeah.
Like on the line. Like he knows that we've already signed this agreement. There's nothing I can do about that. But I'm gonna fight till the very last second.
Yeah.
And so after we go back to our characters and they're like, oh yeah, the war is ending. And he's like, nope, you're going right back out there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, dude.
Well, there's a couple things that happen before that need to be talked about.
That is true. We're missing a huge, another emotional.
Ooh. Okay, so they end up back in this town after some events, and they find out, oh, the war's gonna end, this and that.
That's not the same place that they were like, the
Yeah.
in between.
And so
area.
Paul is the last one to show up because he was obviously in the ditch, and then he just crosses no man's land somehow, which is crazy. But he gets back to the German side, and he ends up in this town, and he's walking around, and he finds one of his friends, good old Chad. I don't know how to say his name. Where is he? Chad. He finds this guy. He's been injured. He's in a injury area or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's taken a round or some shrapnel or something to the leg, and it doesn't look good. Like from a medical standpoint, that leg looked messed up. Like probably needed to be amputated. And so they have this moment of like, oh, relief because he found him.
Didn't he have a neck injury too?
No, he didn't. You're thinking about after the fact. So he has a lower, like a leg injury that essentially it went bad. The wound went sour, and he was gonna die. So then Paul goes to get some food, and he ends up in the mess hall or whatever, and he finds a cat. This guy.
The other friend.
The other friend, this guy. He finds this guy, and there's a nice moment of them, and sharing like, oh, we found each other, you made it, blah 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 blah, and then
he lets him know where the other guy is.
lets him know, hey, Tajad made it too. Let's go, eat some dinner with them. So they take Tajad some dinner,
Yeah, they bring
and
him
the saddest and most messed up scene happens, and it like watching it, It was the closest I came to tears. I didn't cry, but like it was really, really gut wrenching.
Yeah, this is definitely one of them. Like,
And
I would say this is like the most graphic thing.
Oh yeah, easily. And it
'Cause
was
it's
just
the combination of that and just how emotional. Like,
it was completely unexpected for me.
yeah,
I did not see it at all. Like I didn't when it was happening. I was just what the hell?
yeah. Like it when you think back to it after the fact, you're like, okay, I guess
yeah, it does.
somebody could be in that kind of mindset, but
Sure,
you're like,
but I did
yeah,
not.
in the moment, you're like, what the fuck?
Well, I think it's because the entire movie, we're just rooting. We're rooting like, oh, like let this be the last bad thing that happens, and let's hope that everything starts to become good from here on
Throughout
out.
the movie, like all of the characters are typically, I would say, generally like positive in their outlooks.
Mindsets and whatnot. Yeah, they figure out a
They're
way to
all
keep moving
hopeful.
forward.
Yeah.
So
The only one you're like iffy about, honestly, is Kat.
yeah,
Because he has some moments, and he's been there the longest. He's the most,
Right.
season one.
and we find out that he lost a son
Yeah.
before the war.
Yeah, because they have this
It was really
another
funny. It was funny,
moment.
actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny, and then it gets dark.
But
real
yeah,
fast.
it's actually really emotional. So back to this scene. Chad is laying on his stretcher. Clearly, like from my perspective, he's dying. Like that wound was
Yeah,
sour.
I mean,
when I looked at it, I was
most
like, man,
people that
that's
got
messed
injured
up.
in these wars ain't living.
So, they bring him some dinner and they're excited because they're like, oh, we got hot food. We're going to sit down with our friends, the last three of us that are still alive, and we're just going to enjoy this meal.
Because the war is almost
Yeah,
over.
the war is coming to an end. We're going to be okay. And Chad, he's like, hey, did you guys bring cutlery and for his soup? He's like, yeah, we did. We brought it. And they hand him a fork and a spoon. And the way that they did this cinematography was just perfect. The way they cut this scene together was just perfect because they hand him the silverware, and you see John look at the silverware, and it looks almost as if, or it does look like he's appreciative of it.
Yeah.
But you, as a viewer, think he's appreciative of it in the fact that, like, oh,
He's about
they
to
brought
get
me
food. Yeah.
they brought me something to eat with. I don't have to eat with my hands, and it's probably like and also appreciative, like, oh my God, we have silverware because like in real like. In reality, like in the trenches and stuff, you
probably
maybe
had
had a
nothing.
spoon that
Yeah.
you kept with you, but if you lost that, you're eating with your hands, you know?
Even nowadays,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you hold on to your spoons.
Your MRE spoons are valuable.
Yeah.
But so it was an appreciative look that we got. And then it cuts to Paul and Kat eating and enjoying their soup.
They're kind of looking around.
And yeah, they
the
see this
medical-
other soldier off on the side, kind of looking at him out of jealousy and whatnot. And then it cuts back to Chad, and he like looks at this fork, and then he just starts stabbing himself in the neck,
violently.
and like he stabs himself in the neck, and he twists it, and he digs it, like and he's clearly trying to kill himself, and he does. He kills himself by stabbing himself in the neck with a fork, and I mean, obviously, Paul and Kat freak out and they're trying to, stop the bleeding and whatnot. But then, Chad is just like, no, like I don't want to. You could tell he was basically mercy killing himself.
Yeah,
Like he didn't want to
wanna go through life being
cripple or
whatever,
or even
whatever
just
condition he is going to be in. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to be, like handicapped in any way.
and he didn't want to deal with the pain of it because like those kinds
There's a
of
lot of-
injuries that turn sour, it sucks. Like that.
Not even just physical, like the emotional
Yeah.
distress you get put through for the rest of your life. Like,
Exactly. So he's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna end it here, and he does. And it's another one of those moments where you get a glimpse into the kind of mindsets that were produced from the events of this war and the events of this time.
and it doesn't stop.
And and the crappy thing about it is that like you see it happen. It's really sad. It's incredibly grotesque and like you said, probably the most graphic part of the movie. And then the soldier that was looking at them walks over and grabs their food and walks back
That
to
was
his bunk
for the friend,
and just starts eating it. And,
And then-
it's like, do I blame him? Not
No,
really.
absolutely not. But
But
it's just, it's like hitting, kicking somebody when they're down.
Right.
Their friend just killed himself in front of them.
Right.
And now he's like, well, he doesn't need
You're
this
not
food
gonna
anymore.
Eat this, so I'm gonna take it. Yeah. And it's just like I said, it's a glimpse, a very brief glimpse into what it was like to have that kind of mindset back then. And it's not easy to watch, not easy to experience. So yeah, messed up, man. That was the hardest scene to watch, and it was rough. It was a rough moment for me.
Yeah.
So that was a really bad scene. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end either.
Nope.
So,
Of course not.
like you said, this general decides to take it upon himself to end the war on a good note. Essentially, he's like, "Oh, we're gonna go and take back as much of the land as we can get because these plains belong to us." So he gathers up all these troops that are in the area and is like, "All right,
Start
back out there.
Yeah, start organizing everybody. And so
we're gonna take one more charge."
while after our characters get sent back to that rear place again, and they kind of like get their hopes up again, sort of.
Actually, so we're missing one part. The Cat and Paul, they're like, "Oh, the war is over. We're probably going home tomorrow. Let's have one last."
Well, that's what I mean. Like it's right before they just this final scene. They're like, you know what? Let's go for old time's sake.
Yeah.
Let's go and have some breakfast. And so they go back to that same farm where they stole the goose from before to go steal eggs or whatever. Except this time, instead of Cat going in to steal it, he sends Paul.
Right.
And I think it's winter, right?
It is winter. Yeah, it's snowing.
And Paul, climbs the wall and goes in the same way the Cat did the first time. And while he's grabbing the eggs, though, he hears like the barn door close or whatever.
The farmer's son catches him.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, shit. And so the farmer's son goes to go grab the dad. He freaks out. He closes the door on him, so he's locked in the barn. Yeah. So he's like, oh, shit. And he has to like figure a way out. And he finally does, and he climbs over the wall, and he's just like, run.
It's very similar to what happened in the first time because the farmer shoots at them, and
as they're running away.
It's a horrible shot because he's an old man.
Yeah,
and he misses, and
so you don't really think a whole lot about it,
right?
And so they end up running away, and they just have nothing this time instead of with the goose.
Well, they had the eggs, remember, and then the farmer's shot hit the eggs, but not Paul. Right. Yeah. So then they stop, and they're like, oh. Let's not let them go to waste, so they eat them raw.
Whatever's left, yeah.
Which seems gross to us, but it's probably a delicacy to them.
Yeah, they got at least they got food.
And then because of that, they choose to take a break real quick, and Cat's like, "Oh, I gotta go take a leak." So
and so they just kind of like wander off into the woods, into the side. And Paul just sits there, and he's like, "Oh," Cat tells him like, "I'll be back in a little bit."
Yeah.
So he does, and then we're just sitting there for a little while looking at Paul, and he's waiting, and then all of a sudden, you hear a gunshot off in the woods, and he's like, "What the fuck was that?" So he goes to run off to go find Cat, and he finds him.
Yeah.
And then he sees sees him from a little bit of a distance, and he sees him standing there with the farmer's son, but with the shotgun. And then the kid just kind of like runs off, right?
Well, so we actually see Cat walk into the woods. He's taking a piss, and then he hears like something behind him, and the farmer's son is there. And then there's a shot of the farmer's son holding the shotgun facing Cat, and Cat's just kind of like, well, I guess this is how I go out. And then it cuts to Paul in the field, and he hears the gunshot, so he runs into the woods, and then we see Cat kind of walking out of the woods, and like we don't see the kid anymore. He's kind of like stumbling a little bit. He's like, fucking kid. And then they keep walking, and then Cat falls to the ground, and he's got a bullet wound in his lower abdomen. And Paul's like, all right, we're gonna pack it, or we're gonna treat it real quick, and then we're gonna get you back to the base or whatever. So he does eventually get him back. He has to carry him
on the way back, though.
Yeah,
they get passed by this truck full of soldiers, and he's like, "Oh, help!" Like he's been hurt, and they just drive on by.
Yeah, they just don't
pay
care.
no attention to them whatsoever. They're just like, oh,
Yeah,
wow.
they didn't care, man. They were in the out of
They
there.
were like partying basically. Like they're just cheering and just
So
completely
then he
ignoring
picks him up, just like our boy Samwise Gamgee picked up Frodo,
it. Yeah,
carried him up the mountain,
literally. Yeah,
carries him into camp, gets him to the medical station, and he's like, "Yeah, medic, help!" And unfortunately, at that point, Cat had passed
yeah. He had
because,
already been dead.
according to the medic, the bullet passed into his liver and released toxins into the body, and the body, shut down. So, very sad that Cat died. And in this moment, it's really, really sad because, to our knowledge, they're about to go home.
Right.
It's like, man, why did
It's
this?
again, it's
and
the
even
moment.
Cat says, like, man, why did this have to happen now? Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
the cat, yeah. While he's injured and they're like
Yeah.
traveling back, they kind of make it seem like it's not really that big of a deal
yeah,
until they get there and he's
he's
gone.
dead.
And to me, this was like equally as sad as the scene earlier with
Yeah.
the other guy stabbing himself, because this is Paul's last friend.
Yeah, right now, Paul.
This is the guy he's the one who you would think would survive through it all because he's been there the longest. And they talked together and they learned about each other's family and stuff, and talked about how
what
he
it's
was going to
be
go
like. Yeah,
going back to his wife and stuff. And so you're hopeful for these two people.
and everything just points that way because, to our knowledge, the war is about to end. They're gonna go home, and everything is gonna get better.
Yeah. And he dies. Not even during the war.
Yeah, he just dies because of a farmer's kid that.
Was sick of them stealing their shit.
Yeah, which, yeah.
So like, and this is the kind of thing that happens.
And then what makes it even worse, in my opinion, is this whole general thing, because then it's like,
Oh.
well, even if he hadn't died then to the farmer's
He would've
son,
died
he probably would have died in this
afterwards.
battle. Like,
Yeah. Well, maybe, I don't know.
I mean-
maybe he might have been medically like discharged or whatever. But
or yeah, he probably would have lucked out because he had to stay.
maybe
Whatever.
I have no idea. But if he survived, probably would have died anyways.
Yeah,
And when this moment happens,
Yeah.
both, at least me personally, and Paul, like that was
just
it.
gives up.
That's the last straw, and you're like, there's nothing
Yeah.
left.
Yeah,
I literally lost everything.
yeah. And he even talks about how like he joined because he just wanted to, give back to his country or whatever. And then at this point, it's just like, well, what do I have to go back to? Like, I have nothing.
There's nothing.
I have
Like,
no
all
friends.
of his friends are dead.
I have nothing. And you can see it on his face. You can see it on
Yeah,
his
you
face
can
when
see that he's just completely given up
Yeah.
at that point. The moment this guy makes his speech and he's like,
Right.
we're going to go fight for the fatherland one last time. And he's just like,
he's like, okay. He's like a robot.
yeah, he
He's-
literally just turns into a zombie.
yeah, he's just like, okay. And they like
He's
turn.
accepted that he's dead.
However, and I think it's important that we touch on this because it goes back to the whole humanity thing. Despite him have given up on everything, given up on life, given up on because he lost all his friends and everything. When he does go and fight, he fights, right? And there's this kid, fresh recruit,
Yeah.
just made it to the front, and he saves his life because he sees, like, Cat's fighting. He's a veteran fighter, so he's messing people up left and
Yeah.
right. No, killing people. And then he's on top of this bridge overlooking a trench, and he looks down, and there's this kid that it's paralleling him from when he started.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, and despite him have given up on anything, and couldn't have really blamed him if he had just kept pushing forward.
Yeah.
But instead, he took it upon himself to go and save that kid, and he did. He saved the kid from the initial attacker, and then a couple more Frenchmen came, and that was eventually his demise. He was fighting the other Frenchmen, fell down into this bunker area, and got stabbed from behind.
Yeah.
And
Even in the Frenchman too, like the guy that he was chasing, he was just scared for his life.
yeah,
And then the Frenchman that stabs him,
yeah,
I feel like even after that and he drops, even that Frenchman's like, what the fuck did I just do?
yeah. Well, I don't think the guy that stabs him does because we don't really see much of him, but the guy that he was fighting that was going to shoot him, but then he like tackles him down the stairs. Like he's standing there and he's kind of like, oh, Because then at that moment, everybody blows the whistle. Oh, it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
Everybody stop fighting.
Ceasefire. Yeah, and everybody just stop.
Which, I'll be honest, when that happened, in the moment, I was like, I mean, would they really have stopped? Like, I don't know. Because then, like, even...
I feel like, I mean,
I don't know.
I would, because all of them don't really want to be there.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. But it was just sad because he was like literally died 30 seconds too early. He got stabbed in the back by a French guy 30 seconds before the end of the war.
Yeah.
And then we get this very sad scene of him, climbing up the stairs and dying in the trench. And then we get the parallel of the other boy that he has saved being told, hey,
go collect
tags.
Yeah.
And it's just come full circle. Yeah.
And not only that, I can't forget that when he comes up right before he dies and he looks up, he sees that poster that his friend pinned to the wall.
Right.
That's when you realize they're in the exact same trench that they started at.
Right.
And that's important because that's all World War II was.
Right.
Was a slugfest, or World War I, sorry. Just a slugfest of fighting and brutality for nothing. For like inches of gain. So
I think I looked it up. I think it was at the end of the war, when the armistice was put in place, the front line had moved something like 70 yards total.
That's insane.
And I mean, it went back and forth throughout the war, but by the time the war was done, the line moved 70 yards.
That's it.
All those people. Was it 17 million people died in World War One?
Some crazy number.
I pray because they put it in the graphic at the end of the movie. I think it was 17 million people. It's either 13 or 17. Pretty sure it's 17. But millions of people died in this war. On this front alone, millions of people died for 70 yards of land.
40 million total.
I think so. I think that the 17 million was just on that front alone then. Because I know they specifically put a figure at the end.
Yeah.
So I'd say
it would have been close to 20 million.
I think it was 17 million people died on the Western Front alone, which is for 70, like roughly 70 yards of land gained or lost. Like it's like
basically nothing.
Yeah. 17 million people died on that front for nothing. For absolutely nothing. And it's just bizarre to me. It's bizarre. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad and it's heart-wrenching that many people died for really no reason. And especially at this particular scene of all these young men dying because this general had too much pride.
Yep.
And
it's not like he's the one going in.
Yeah. And it was very...
for the fatherland, you're going to charge one last time. And for what?
And they made a point of it to show that this general was in the rear at all times,
always
enjoying himself,
in his, like,
eating
super
good
high
food.
Room with super fancy living quarters. And he makes his speech on a very high balcony, talking to everybody, just standing in the mud all around him, explosions going on in the background.
Man. I really hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you guys that have watched this movie felt the same way that me and Taylor did throughout this movie, and just how absolutely bizarre and inhuman a lot of this movie was. And we could probably continue to talk about all of the crazy and horrible things that happened during this movie, but like I said in the beginning, it's important that we reflect on these things and we talk about these things so that, one, that we can honor the people that went through it, but also so that the ideas that led to something like this happening don't happen again. And this movie hit me really hard. It probably hit me harder than it probably hit a lot of people. So Thank you for continuing to push me to watch this movie and making sure that I followed through on it so we can do an episode on our show. But in the end, man, this movie was incredible, and I'm really glad that I watched it, but also really sad that I watched it.
It is very sad. But I feel like it's important.
Yeah, it is.
To learn about, see the kind of stuff.
It is very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to hear from you guys on what your thoughts are on this movie. If you haven't watched it, maybe like does our explanation make you want to watch the movie? And if not, I'm curious to know why. Like, I'm curious to know what it is that keeps people from watching movies like this. Not saying that you're bad or you're wrong or anything. It's just
no, there's nothing.
I'm curious to know, like, why don't you want to watch a movie like this? So let me know down in the comments below whether you liked it or not. And we look forward to talking to you guys. And I look forward to not being so sad in the future. Yeah. But thank you guys for being here. Please like, subscribe, comment, share with a friend. Check us out on social media, Anykind Media Cast on Instagram and Twitter. And we will catch you guys in the next episode.
Bye, guys.